on.
Today's date is July 8th, 2019. My name is Daniel Bradfield. I am the oral historian with the Orange County Regional History Center, and with me is
Alexandra Chichelong. I'm One Orlando Oral History Archivist.
And today I'm interviewing
Jose Feliciano in my studio.
Yes, in St. Cloud, Florida. And
my name is Angel Rivera, artist and director for Keepers of Heritage.
Okay. As we mentioned before, this interview is being conducted at Mr. Feliciano's home in St. Cloud, Florida. So to start off, when and where were you born?
I was born in Isabela, Puerto Rico in the year 1939. This is a big banner year for me.
What did your parents do for a living?
My parents were sharecropper. My dad was a sharecropper, and my mom at the time sewed. She sewed gloves for, at home. When I was about 5, my dad moved to the United States, found a job with the Union News Company in the Oyster Bar in Grand Central Station. Very shortly after that, my dad sent for my mom and 3 of the boys. Myself, I'm the oldest and the first. And we lived in a wonderful place, 75 East 106th Street, between Madison and Park, right next to Central Park and the Museum of the City of New York. And so, for a kid, it was a brand new world. And I discovered the museum very quickly. I went to grade school, PS 107, all European teachers at the time. I don't know how we did it, but there were no special classes for Hispanics. We just got there and we swam with everybody else. And we got 10 words a week, which we had to memorize, spell, and write sentences on. We had music classes, classical music, little 45s. And we had drawing classes and lots of reading. So we were getting a very special, to me, very special education, because from that I discovered classical music, which I love. Handel, it was incredible. I was a sponge, and it was the perfect place to be. I went to Central Park as often as I was allowed. We had chores to do, and if you did everything you had to do, also, my job was to make sure that my siblings did their homework. And I was to be the first one home every day, because then my mom got a job sewing. My dad was at work, and sometimes he worked nights, and sometimes he slept days, and everybody shifted according to the needs of the family. When I was 14, I got working papers. That was what was done. And it was not a big deal, making 50 cents an hour, it was 50 cents. But it's 50 cents. And from that, I got to save, and I put half of the salary on the desk, on the table, in the kitchen. We had rules and regulations for everybody. I spent my life at the public library. And one of the things that would happen, the Europeans in the building, as they moved on, would leave their books. And I would go into these empty apartments, and I would cart home all these books that I would store underneath my bed. That became the great escape, because by that time the family had grown one more, and then we were 6. And so, being the eldest, you take after your father. And you're responsible for the siblings, and you're responsible for as much of the house as your father is. My mom worked, she got home. I got to learn how to start dinner. She came home and she made the meat and the sauces and things like that. But living in Manhattan, having the museums at my beck and call, going to Central Park and walking around, actually 106th Street has the gates. The Vanderbilts built these incredible iron gates that you have, and then you walk down these marble steps, and there's a long alley of benches and cherry blossom trees. And I'd love to walk down this aisle, and these ladies and gentlemen, all very well dressed, all ladies with white gloves on, gentlemen with straw hats, especially in the summer. And as a kid, you walk through, and they would raise their heads up and acknowledge you, and then go back to reading. And that meant, we know you're here. Okay, and there was decorum, there was a respect. You went all the way down, and there were 3 graces, a fountain, beautiful piece. At the end of this, there was a rotunda with grape plants over the top. To me, it was an education, because I wanted to live on that street with the doormen and the white stone buildings, and there was an ambiance, and of course it was a museum. And I learned that if I got to the museum on certain days when there were families or people, I would step behind them so that I could look like I was with them, because children were not allowed by themselves. Once I was inside, I could go anywhere. But that was my education, was to walk through this museum and in awe of, this was New York in the old days. The paintings, the furnishings, the clothing. And so we become, I guess for me, I became the teacher of my family. There were things I was learning as a kid that I could expose my family to. And I think it's what most children of immigrants do. They grow up in a different society, and they bring home the society. Interestingly enough, in those days, because Europeans wore dark clothing because of the winters in Europe, and Hispanics wore bright clothing because they came from a garden. And we were ostracized a lot, not the men but the women, because they wore bright clothing and bright lipstick and stuff like that. And you're looking at a time when we stood out maybe a little too much. But we lived in a building with Europeans, Irish, Greek, Polish, Jewish, and everybody got along, and all the kids got along. We didn't grow up in the Spanish Harlem. We grew up in a different environment. And I guess my first job was working at the bakers, the Italian bakers, which were nearby. So you're invited into an ambiance of different peoples, different foods. My mother learned how to make corned beef and cabbage from Mrs. McGovern on the 6th floor. And it became a standing ritual. St. Patty's Day, everybody in the building made corned beef and cabbage. And it was a very wonderful time. As an adult, it's made me think that we were not a melting pot. In a melting pot, all the candles are the same color. We were like Joseph's coat of many colors. And we still are. These are the people that made America what America is. The architecture, the paintings, the clothing, the languages. This is a very rich culture. And to me, it's you accept it with open arms. And it does the same for you. As I worked in different fields, I worked at the movie theaters, and I was an usher since the age of 14. And a couple of years later, my assistant manager got sent into the army, and this man, Albert Unger, is a wonderful Jewish man, and he said to me, Jose, watch, listen, and learn so you can do what they do. And it was like the best advice. He was a very kind, very harsh man. He was a mathematician of incredible. He would add 3 columns all the way down sideways. And he'd get down to the bottom, he'd say, right? Now he's still up at top somewhere. But he was a good teacher. And I ended up learning from everybody I learned from. All these people had something to tell me. There was somebody in the building, I never knew who it was, who used to get Theater Arts magazine monthly. And in those days, Theater Arts came with a full-length play. And I'd find these things in the garbage and I'd bring them home. And there were pictures of actors, and it was a world, and it appealed to me. We had the cousin who got sent into the service. He used to draw, and he had colored pencils, and he'd sit quietly for hours, and he'd draw. And to me, it was these magic pencils, colored pencils. The first time I saw 3 men on a boardwalk above a building painting this huge sign, I wanted to be up there doing that. You know, it little things in life that kind of open their arms to you and your eyes to it. And this is, we didn't have we had no television. When we finally got one, it was the sign, it was about 9 inches in the round. And what they did was they sold this piece of plastic that was a magnifying glass that you attached it to, so that more than one person can watch the TV at the same time. It was like looking through a ship's porthole. You know, but you know, you did, and you got along. And one of the apartment right across from us, there was a family, and there was a young girl who went to the same elementary school, and it was a 7-room apartment. In those days, there were long railroad flats, and she was taking tap lessons. She was taking dancing lessons. She was probably about 8 or 9, and she would tap from the kitchen 6 rooms to the front and 6 rooms back, and that's all you heard was tap dancing back and forth. And then she was a flamenco dancer, so I saw her in school, and then I saw her in a period dance with a huge white wig and a very fancy. And to me, I was so impressed with this young child. Years later, I go to see West Side Story, and she's in the chorus. It was incredible. I mean, just little things that happened that connected you to this life. And my dad, of course, he started out as a sharecropper, he wanted to see me in a white shirt and tie. And so I took retailing in high school and commercial art. And I went to sell shoes, and I did it. And then I went to work for a bank, and I was a teller. I enjoyed it because I loved the people coming in. And in those days, people could stand in front of whatever teller they wanted. And I had the elderly Europeans who trusted me, and they brought me candies. And they brought their bank books in little brown paper bags. And there would be 2 or 3 of them, and I'd say, okay, this one is mine, that one is the bank down the block. But, you know, they brought me lifesavers and a smile, and they would, you know, talk to me. And the guard would come and say, folks, there's places over there. No, it's okay, we'll wait for Mr. Feliciano. It was fun. They needed, I guess a lot of them were widowed, and they needed somebody to talk to. And I didn't mind it. I mean, it made my job easier, you know, and it made it fun. I got married, had 2 children, I had a divorce, and but after that I got involved with a group of artists, and I went to this church, and one day I walked into the basement and they were rehearsing for a children's play, and I said, so what are you doing? They said, oh, we're doing this. He said, do you know anybody who can paint scenery? And I had done that in high school. I had painted scenery for the musicals. I said, I can do that. All of a sudden I was painting scenery for these kids shows. And then I was writing scripts. And then I got a job in Ohio designing the Great American Musical. And it got me out of the city during the summers. And I did MAME and How Now Dow Jones and Carousel. And they would, in those days, they would take the TV stars, and the TV stars would go from theater to theater in the circuit. And we had a company, and let's say we rehearsed Fiddler on the Roof for 2 weeks, and then Shelley Berman comes in and he's Fiddler. And I designed the scenery and built the props and everything else, and he does that, and then he goes someplace else and does the same thing. So out of all this, there was a TV show called The Show of Shows. And there was this woman, Giselle McKenzie. One day I'm designing Hello Dolly, and they said, oh, Giselle McKenzie's going to be the star. And I thought, my God, I was a kid. She was a young woman on the show. So, you know, life kept coming in. My past kept coming into my future. I did that for many years. I then went to work for Joseph Papp for Shakespeare Festival. And in those days, you know, you walked in and you said, I can paint, I can do props. Okay, sign here. There was no big deal. And so I'm building armor from scratch, and I'm painting scenery. I'm working on a Broadway play at the same time. I'm working on Man of La Mancha. And, you know, it just, I guess I was kind of lucky. Things just kept coming by, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And so I found myself designing and painting, and I started doing off-Broadway plays. I did a lot of ballet for, in those days, most of the companies were small, nonprofit, and I was nonprofit too. I mean, there was very little money. Sometimes they paid your car fare. But I built scenery, and I enjoyed it because, again, the music was most of it was classical. I got to know the ballets, to respect the people who were doing it. I saw the kind of work that these people did, and the hours that they spent at the studios rehearsing every day, 3 hours, 4 hours. And as romantic as it seemed, some of my friends were dancers, and they waddled when they walked down the street. I could see somebody walking down the street and saying, she's a dancer, she's a ballet dancer, because they walk this way. They don't walk straight like people do. And the guys do too, because all this turnout does something to the pelvis. So the pelvis goes like this, and all of a sudden they're walking sideways. But, and poor dancers had beautiful girls, the ugliest feet you ever saw in your life. Because with the toe shoes, the toes climb up on top of each other, because they have to tape them down. But it was an education, and I had an automobile accident, and I had my pelvis on my left side got a crack. So I walked a little bit like Frankenstein, one leg straight and one leg dragging. I did that for years. And one of the guys in the company said to me, you know what? You know what would help you? And I said, what? He said, take ballet classes. I said, you're kidding. He said, no, take ballet classes, because you have to start strengthening that leg that you favor, so you're saving it. And I took ballet classes for almost 2 years. And I managed to walk directly again. Because it was the drag. I couldn't walk on the beach because I had no traction. I couldn't lift both legs. It was one here and one drag, and one here, one drag. So, you know, it helped me. It cured my problem. It taught me something about dance and movement, because I have 2 left feet, and which is okay. You say you're Hispanic. No, that doesn't work that way. But then my life started changing. I started doing some films. I worked for JWT, J. Walter Thompson, the advertising agency, for a while. And then I worked for Children's Television Workshop, CTW, and that was, they did a lot of the, a lot of the kid shows, and they also did Sesame Street. So I got involved with people like that, and I was still working. Things got a little the jobs got scarce. I decided, I went to work for a company. I had studied bookkeeping. A friend of mine called me up and she said, I work for American Theater Productions, and we need a bookkeeper. You want a job? I said, sure. So I went, and then I told the guy that I could do, that I was an artist. So I started doing posters and advertisements and copywriting, and I'd do interviews. I'd go to Philadelphia and interview somebody and bring it back. So my whole life kept changing. All of a sudden I was a copywriter, an advertising director, and then I directed film. And again, it was like luck. Just went from one thing to the other. Then I got married. 15 years after a divorce, I got married the second time. And I said, never gonna happen again, never gonna happen again. I was in a job in Syracuse, and I was staying at a hotel, and I walked down from my room one morning, and this beautiful young lady says, "Buenos dias, Señor Feliciano." And I thought, she's talking Spanish. She was, like from Castilian Spanish. And I said, "Are you Hispanic, Castilian?" She said, "No, I'm Danish." I said, "You are?" She said, "Yes, I lived in Spain. I studied in Spain." And she spoke, and she used to play guitar, and she took flamenco lessons. And very creative human being, and very pretty to look at. And then she went back to Spain. 2 years later, she called me. She said, "Hi, it's Karina. I'm in town. Can I see you?" And I said, "Sure." Well, we started seeing each other, and the Danes have a strange thing about relationships. If you bring a girl home, your parents will let you bring her in, and you can live with her in your house, in their house, and it's perfectly normal. So her parents said, "Why don't you guys just live together?" And I thought, I guess that's the way that's the way they do it. We lived together for several years, and then we got married. And she was a brilliant mind. She was the top of her class at Fordham University. She had an IQ of 150. Bright, she could learn anything. She would just zero in on what she was learning. She went from being a clerk in an office to being one of the vice presidents in a year and a half. She used to attend all the meetings and make suggestions. And we had a good life. Then we decided to leave the city and move to upstate New York, because it was the only affordable place we can go. We got a farm. She took up husbandry, sheep. And she went to one of the universities. They gave her 10 sheep, and she would have to return them in a certain amount of time. She did a good job, and she also worked. She was a Spanish teacher, adjunct at some of the colleges. And I did translations for a company. I did computer manual translations. It was just another job, another opening in the world. But you have to earn a living, and you have a family. I loved the country, but the winters were long. And we had, my daughter was born in New York before we went to upstate New York. And then she wanted a natural birth, like for Aaron, for my son. So we got a midwife, and I took all the classes, and I did all of the things that I had to do. And Christiana was about 3 years old, and she knew all the terms. The umbilical cord, the cutting, the catching the baby. We watched movies. And I was working at the company, and I got a call at noon. And I got this, "I'm ready," and the midwife is not here. The midwife was an hour away in Syracuse. I was 10 minutes away. Got into the house, changed my clothes, washed my hands, put on a pair of gloves, jumped to the top of the bed. And my mother-in-law was supposed to have been there to look after my daughter. Well, Christiana she's at the foot of the bed like this. And she's saying, Dad, can I cut the umbilical cord? And I said, we'll see. But I said, your plastic scissors have to be boiled and they would get all out of shape. So we'll have to wait on that, okay? And a couple of minutes later, there was my son. There was all this dark hair. And then there was this child that I had by the legs, you know, to give him a slap in the back, and he cried without my slapping him. And I put him on his mother's chest. I counted all the fingers, all the toes, just because. And he seemed to be normal enough. And Cristiano saying, Dad, can I cut the umbilical cord? By this time, the midwife comes in. Everything is fine. And I said, Cristiano wants to cut the umbilical cord. And so she gave her the scissors. And she goes like this. She goes, Dad, this is hard. It's a very strong muscle. So she said, Dad, why don't you do it? This child watched the whole procedure, did not move an eyelash. She just thought it was normal and fascinating. And in Hispanic culture, since we had a farm, we also had chickens. You go out and you find the biggest chicken you have, and you make a big pot of chicken soup. And by that time, the midwife was there, the mother-in-law was there. Cristiana was now busy with grandma and all, and her little brother. I went outside and I grabbed this chicken by the legs, and I do this, nothing. No, I can't do this today. I've just given birth to a child. I've just brought a child into the world. I can't do this. But I went inside the house and I took out a bottle of whiskey that I had a great big shot. It happened. All of a sudden I realized what I'd done, what had happened. And everybody was happy. We lived on a farm. The kids spent a lot of their time out in the woods, bringing home rocks, snakes, lizards. And then I got a job as a teaching assistant. And I enjoyed it with special education kids. And that got me through a lot of the stresses in my life. And when the marriage didn't work, it was a good job for me because now I had all these kids to take care of. And it changed, it did a lot of changes. When I had to get a divorce, I asked the lawyer if I could ask for the children. And he said, yes, you can. I said, the possibilities. He said, it's up to you and the judge. I spent 2 years. I read every manual there was. I talked to people, I talked to ministers, I talked to everybody. And turns out that my ex-wife was bipolar. And nothing could be done about that. In those days it was quite new. And so I thought, okay, I can do this, I can take care of the children. I wrote a manual. I wrote, I'm a male. Is that a problem? I'm older. Is that a problem? I can cook. That's no problem. Machines wash. That's no problem. I have a job with the school. I have a decent living. Turns out the legalities can be expensive. So, lost the house, lost the farm, but got the kids. And I came to Florida with 2 children. My son said to me, Dad, this is the worst decision you've made in your life. This little kid. Because we got rid of the sled, the toboggan, the snowboard, everything that was life. And we went to the beach, and there was a couple of hippies, and they were doing the not snowboarding. They were doing the great big surfing. And they said he was standing like this, and they say, "Hey, Sonny, you want to do this?" And he said, "Can I, Dad?" And I said, "Sure, go." They took him out, put him on the surfboard. He got on there. This 7-year-old kid stands there, and he looks like he's been doing it all of his life. He says, "Can I get one of those, Dad?" I said, "We'll work on it." He was happy. That's all that was important. And he was very much an outdoors kid. Christiana was very much into her drawing and her painting and stuff like that. We did very well, the three of us. We shared all the household. Everybody learned how to cook. My kids were good because they learned how to eat everything. And they could ask for things like lentil soup without a problem, and they could make it. Christiana was very good in the kitchen with cakes and pies, and she would make desserts. We all had a job. Each one was responsible for doing their laundry, keeping their room clean, and there were laws. And the house is always open to their friends. I thought, if I know who you go out with, who you hang out with, it gives me a place of argument or discussion. By this time, I've been working with special education kids quite a while, and I became a commercial art teacher, which was great. With special ed kids, commercial art, one of the projects we did was I got them to think about commercials, and I said, you're going to create a commercial, but before you do the commercial, you're going to create a product. You tell me what you're interested in. The girls wanted cologne and shoes and stuff like that. I said, okay, you got to design the shoes. You have to design the cologne. You have to figure out what's in the cologne, what the ingredients. Is it, for shaving for men, is it? And all these kids are all of a sudden, then they had to write a blurb about this product. They had to create the product, create the box. And it was not about teaching art, it was about teaching reality. Bob was going on out there. One of the kids designed a new burger. So he had to make a hamburger with styrofoam. And he had to do a packaging and call it a name. It was for them, it was the most exciting class they'd ever been. Because they got to use, and they had to write jingles. And you think that these kids, they can't even read well. They were creating jingles in their head, and then somebody was writing it for them. And they were doing presentations, and they had to do a presentation for the teachers and for the other students. That was a great eye-opener for me, because that began to tell me that they were capable. If you gave them something that they got interested in, they were willing to work hard. And what was happening is they were cutting down the vocational programs, and mine was a vocational. And so the vocationals gave them, we had vocational small engine repair, which was good. They had wood shop. You can work for Lowe's or for Home Depot and cut wood. And boys and girls, they enjoyed that. All of a sudden, they wanted to have art classes in art history. Well, this was the wrong group. I used art history by using Leonardo da Vinci, because he had something in common that they did as well. He was a bastard child. And I told him, the mom got pregnant and the guy wasn't going to marry her. So, but he spent his time in the woods. He started drawing the flowers, the plant. He started drawing how the water ran. He started making bridges out of. So we created bridges. We made bridges. We made catapults. I went into the history of Leonardo da Vinci's time, and I had to give him 3 exams a year. I used the same exam. I just added more information. But they knew who Leonardo da Vinci was. They knew what he had. And of course, da Vinci had done weapons. Boys love weapons. I said, okay, so we're going to take a clamshell or a shell of some kind and put nails sticking out, put it on wheels. 4 people are going to get underneath it and push it against the enemy. Oh, that's so cool. Because it was something, and the girls loved the fact that during the Renaissance, they had all this masks and all this, and Da Vinci made musical instruments. So you took the reality that they were interested in war, interested in machines. And there was enough illustrations in Leonardo's machines for them to get interested in. You know, like the idea of making a cone and putting it like a parachute, or using it. Oh, Da Vinci was trying to walk on water, so we got great big pieces of styrofoam. You know, and how much weight can this hold? You know, we used little toys, those flexible toys, and put them on foam, just to push them, to just show them, because they had to think about buoyancy. So what to me it was just taking one person, one personality, and there was a whole lifetime behind this personality. And the fact that, and I said, and he was so smart, he learned it all himself. He did go to school, he studied painting, but he wasn't going to be left behind because he was a bastard son of somebody. I said, the father got one of his workmen to marry her, so he became legitimate. But they had a sense of reality in those schools. Every once in a while they'd have somebody from the district come visit to see. We had a great big room with lots of light, and I had gotten a great big basket of daisies and put it in the window. And we had desks that they had to keep clean, drawing desks. And what would happen is the secretary would call me and she'd say, "You got company." And so I'd say, "Okay, everybody, we're changing the class for today. Let's do some Da Vinci history." And the door would open. You could not acknowledge anybody there. You'd say, "Okay, so somebody tell me something about Da Vinci. Raise your hand." You know, and what did he design and what did he invent? Well, they would all want to talk. They all wanted to show how smart they were. Well, I tell you, those people walked out of that classroom thinking, this is incredible. They're learning. They were learning because they were interested in learning. You know, and then they closed the program down. By this time, I was 69 years old, and it was easy enough to get rid of me. But it was no big deal. I went and I volunteered for adults with disabilities. I started doing summer art classes at Osceola Arts. And I had the kids who just wanted to be there, the kids whose parents wanted them to learn how to use their hands. And that was very successful. It's almost everything I had learned growing up became my class. Because basically I'd start with saying, "Okay, so tell me, what's the color of a rose?" Everybody now, "Red." I said, "Wrong." Let's take a look at roses. What's the shape of a leaf? "Ah, it's a leaf." I said, "Has a shape? Has a heart shape?" "Oh, no, it don't." I said, "When was the last time you looked at a leaf?" The challenge was, stop and look. Bring me something from home, from the garden, that you've never seen before. And they were interested in seeing. And we have these great big plants out there with the great big leaves, and I'd bring those cuttings in and they would put them on brown paper, and they would take a magic marker and they would do this great big leaf, which is probably 3 feet wide by 4 feet long. And then they had to give it a color of their own, and we paste those on the walls. I wanted them to do like Leonardo, get interested in life around them, in nature. Okay, I'd say, okay, so look at the trees. If the sun goes down, what's the color of the trees? You're at home by this time, but take a look and see what the color. You see those orange streaks or pink streaks. I said, take a look at what's going on in the world, because nobody had ever seen. I said, I'd say, how many of you have read a book? Men don't read books, women do. That was a new one for me. I said, oh man, I read, I have lots of books. What's the problem? But getting them to stop and look at a book, look at the illustrations, look at nature. And I play music. I'd say, okay, this is, I played Leonardo's, now I lost my train of thought. I played a piece of music that they were not, Beethoven. And they said, oh, you know that was in the movie with the dog. I said, okay, so you remember that, so that you remember the piece of music, right? Yeah, I saw the movie. But I said, tell me something about the movie. Because films with young kids have a tendency to go past their eyes and continue. Doesn't go in here. And that's one of the big problems with literature. If you do films, Swiss Family Robinson, let's say, and you don't explain the fact that they carried all the animals from the boat to the land, how do you think they did it? And so I did with them what I did with my own is we took corks, we took bottles, we tied Barbie dolls to bottles and corks. We put them in the bathtub, and I said, this is how they brought them to land. Because it's not just to say you read the book, that you understand it. I said, according to this, the time and the place and the world in those days, those animals that show up on this island did not exist in that part of the world, in that part of the equator. Now, do you know what an equator is? So it was a way of giving them something to think about and then showing them. And to me, teaching was and still is one of my best experiences, because I learned yesterday, the day before I was at Home Depot, and I hear this voice saying, "Professor, Professor!" And I turn around because I was the only one in the aisle, and it was one of my students. And so he's with a friend, and now the guy must be he's 26, 27 years old now. And he says, "This is my professor. He taught me architecture. I taught him how to do architectural drawings." Because we had a big drafting table that somebody had given. And so that stayed in his mind, that I taught him how to make an architectural drawing. And he said he's an architect, and I thought he got a little confused. But the idea was he remembered who I was, and he remembered something that I taught him. And that to me is, or they'll say, "Mr. Feliciano, remember me? I was your bad kid." I said, "You're all my bad kids," and we laugh. But he says, "I want you to meet my wife, and these are my kids." There's a return. It's not about pride. It's about the fact that I did what I wanted to do. I did it with lots of love and care. That was important. By this time, my children are getting freer of me, and they're going to move on. And so I'm using, that was my way of just returning what I could no longer give my children, because they were now teenagers and lives of their own. But and then the painting. I went back to painting seriously. I got together with Angel and the group, and I started thinking about my roots, because I had no roots, by the way. I grew up in America, but I didn't grow up Hispanic. All the music I heard was classical music. All the paintings I saw were Europeans. All the movies I saw were in English. A couple that I could name that my mom took me to the films. But it was a different in my life with the books, because living in a household with 5 other siblings doesn't give you too much time to think. And the books were my way of, I didn't know I was learning. I was just enjoying the reads. And but I got more involved with the Hispanics, with the world of immigrants. That painting up there, that the child, he's in a city environment holding a lamb, and out through the back window are little spots of white in the back. To me, it was a recollection of what you left. And now you're in a bigger city, and what do you remember? that's still part of who you are. That, in a sense, was me remembering. I had gone back to Puerto Rico several times for summers or a couple of weeks when my grandfather was alive, and he was my connection to the Hispanic world. But he was one of those special human beings, and but I got more involved in the world, the world around me, what people go through, the hunger. This thing is called Flowers for a Baptism. I did the drawings of Grand Central Station, and there were two women with a baby. And when I redid the painting, I did an artist, and I had a bunch of flowers in the house. So you don't know whether it's real or he's painting them. Yeah, he's painting the flowers. So that's the world changed for me. That piece there was an ancestor. When I realized that I came from African, Spanish, and Taino Indians. We're three races in one. And I knew very little about the Indians, most because of the light coloring. I remember more of the Spanish influence. Because most of my side, except for my dad's side, was the dark side. My mom's side was all the light side. So it was finding, who are you? And it changed me a lot. But I guess I was a human being. I didn't have an identity as a Hispanic or an American or anything else. It made me think of the fact that, and I wrote it on my blackboard, that we are not, as I said before, we're not a melting pot. We're a coat of many colors, and that to me is very pleasant, because the people that I've met from my childhood on in the United States and still meeting are people from all walks of life, from all different ethnicities. And they're all the kind of people that I like very much. And I am them, and they are me. And I've included the Hispanics, because it took me a while to find, this young man, Angel, has a brilliant mind. And he works very hard, and he thinks things out. And he's much younger than I, but he reminds me of that tenacity and that drive to learn, to take a step forward, and to do better. And that to me, I guess, talking about the history of museum and talk about the impact, to me it's important that more Hispanics learn about their culture, learn about all the good things. As Shakespeare said, the evil that men do lives after them, the good is often interred with their bones. We take a couple of bad apples and we consider everybody's, in that same bucket, and it's not true. There's lots of very fine people of all colors and all kinds of races, and it's up to us to take a stand and say, this is who we are. We are more. We expect more of you. That's the difference. Somebody has to expect more of you and is willing to teach you and willing to take the time to explain it to you. History is very important. The history of a people is important. The history of the struggles of a people is very important. And for me, art is that way of saying, this is the struggle that we all go through. Art, up there, there's 2 sections on books, on food, from Germany to Japan to China. It's there because if I go to a restaurant and somebody says, have you tried this? I'm thinking, I'm going to try it, something different. There's literature because the world is made of great writers. Russian and Tolstoy and Anna Karenina, and there's all this beautiful learning experience. They're not just words, they're pictures. And then there's my theater side, and that's all theater and movies and Shakespeare. See, I have the big one there. And I one point, and it's interesting, a couple of years ago I started to think, gosh, I'm 75 years old, 3/4 of a century. And I'm not remembering things the way I used to. And I thought, oh, well, we're going to do something about that. So I started memorizing Shakespeare sonnets. And I wake up in the morning and I go through the house reciting sonnets. I thought, we got to keep those connections going. Because it's not a big deal. And I happen to like them. And I have my favorites. So I thought, it's for me. It's for myself.
Excuse me.
That's okay. Yeah, maybe it's run out of time.
Should I stop the recording?
Yeah, let's stop real quick. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
The reason all these headshots is because since I was working for a theater company, every time they did a promotion book for sale, all the people working on it got photographed.
Oh, okay.
So depending on what I was wearing,
Could you
Sure.
grab that picture real quick?
I'll take that out. Okay,
Yeah.
you got it.
Oh, just hold it up in front of you. That's perfect. Yeah. So that's an industrial shoot.
Yeah, this was for a job,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to. I had ordered the suit. I had it delivered to my job. I ran out at lunchtime, changed in the taxi, got to the place, got on stage, did my bit. It was like 3 minutes. I swung it on a rope.
Okay.
And it was for Sylvania light bulbs, the Sylvania company. And I said, holy halogen cycle, Batman. And then I took the gun and I shot off all the lights in the theater. And that was but I made money to buy paint.
Yeah.
And then I was working for Stiller and Mira for the comedians. And I had to, they called me before I left the house in the morning and said, we need a machine gun. And they needed a machine gun prop that they thought of the day before. So I've got this outfit on, and it was in the days of Khomeini. And so I'm walking the streets of New York looking for a taxi with this outfit and wrapped Tommy gun in newspaper. I thought, I'm going to end up in jail today.
Surprised you ended up in jail at the time.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was how one had to do to make a living.
Yeah, that was a question that I had that I've been thinking about. I didn't want to interrupt you or anything.
Yeah,
But it was a question that I had during the time you were talking. How did you fit your artwork into the time where you were doing, like you said, like retail work or anything else? Were you doing painting independently?
No, I was just filling in the space of time that I needed. I needed to. I was looking for myself, but I also I needed a job. I couldn't live on my own, and I needed a job to pay my bills. So I took jobs that showed up. I had a theory. People would call me up because I was doing handyman work. People would call up and say, can you do this, this, and this? And I'd say, listen, I had a busy week. Can I call you back in a couple of days? And then I'd call up my friends and I'd say, how do you do this? And if I thought I could do it, it's funny because I told Angel, I cut hair for friends. I had a little pair of scissors and I chopped their hair for $15 a haircut. And I did that for a couple of years. $15 paid for one tube of paint. And it was honest. They were willing to pay, and I cut the hair like he has. That very short, nothing style. That was the style anyway. Everybody had the same kind of short haircut. You were workers. You didn't. It took me a while the beard took a while for people to get used to, but it's what you did. And I painted scenery, I painted floors.
So when did you, roughly, when did you start getting back into painting canvases? Just general.
Actually, when I was working for American Theater Productions, and I was doing all those posters and doing the bookkeeping. And I asked since I did the bookkeeping, I knew how much money he spent. He had a boat, and he used to go to Bimini for weekends. And it was $300 to $500 for gasoline to run this thing. And I went into his office and I said, I want a raise. And he said, I can't afford it. And I said, do you want it in writing or do you want it verbal? And he said, in writing. I said, I'll be right back. I went into my office and I had the papers with the carbon. There were 5 carbons. And I took the biggest pen I had. As of this date, I hereby resign. And I signed it, and I went in, I went, yours? No. I gave everybody one. I walked back out. And my 2 weeks were up. He said, would you do me a favor? I said, what is that? I knew what it was. He said, would you stay until we find somebody? They had to find 2 people to do my job. I thought, no big deal. And I thought, I went freelance. It was rough. But I started painting because the impact of having no job, feeling like the man in the street with no life, with no place to go, I started feeling like that. I started feeling like I was lost. And what do I do now? You know, I didn't want to borrow money. I didn't want my folks to know that I was poor. And I was hungry. I used to go to the park and run barefooted on the cinder track. It kept me from thinking about food. And I'd do sketches of the people that were there, the homeless and all that. It was quite a time. And I bought lentils, and I made. It was like a month's worth of lentils cooked one time. Every day I had a bowl of lentils. That was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I was so, I guess, downhearted. One day I'm sitting in my little studio, and I reached out and I grabbed my Bible, and this voice, before I opened it, this voice said, so you think you're the first one? And I started to laugh. I started to laugh because I wasn't the first one who was going to lose his apartment, had no money to pay the phone, no money to buy food, nothing. And I'm 26 years old or 27 years old. I began to cry and laugh at the same time. And I thought, okay, I guess, and the interesting thing is, I go to the park, and I'm sketching, and there's this guy on a bicycle who's just rolling by, and he stops where I am, and he says, Jose, how are you? And I said, fine. He said, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, of course. He said, the fellow who took your place when you left the TV studio, he's an actor, and he got a job. Would you mind coming back? And I said, when is Monday too soon? He said, Monday would be fine. And he said, good, see you Monday. It was Jerry Stiller. He said, Monday's fine. There you go, you know. I was just, it's funny because in those days I was walking in Central Park to sketch because it kept me from thinking of food. I found a dime, and I ran to the corner grocer and I bought an onion for 10 cents. I got home and I chopped it into little pieces, and I didn't cook it. I left it raw and I put it over my lentils. And I had lentils with raw onion. And it was like better than steak. Because I guess it's lessons in life that make you think to be thankful for whatever it is, and that perhaps there's something on the other side of this day that's going to change everything. And you know, I was doing shows, I was designing scenery for free, I got a call from Westbeth, which is a nice theater on the west side, and a woman friend of mine asked me if I would do it. She said, but I need a favor. I said, what is that? She said, there was a nun by the name of Juana Inés de la Cruz, and she was Mexican, and at 16, she came from a wealthy family. She had a choice to get married or to join the nunnery. And she was one of those young children with the brains. Her grandfather had a library, and he used to teach the oldest daughter how to read. This little kid is sitting by, and she's listening to all this. She ends up learning and memorizing everything that the grandfather has been teaching the older sister. She could write music, she could write poetry. She was a great philosopher. She was a great humanist. So she joins a nunnery. And she gets to speak at a gathering of priests and nuns. By the way, she almost got taken by the Inquisition, because in those days, nuns did not read Bibles. And she had a little cell full of books. Most nuns didn't read. And but she goes to this session, and she speaks her mind about nuns and learning and women. And then she gets a letter. It's called the Letter of Athena. And it is chastising her for being a smart woman. And it's signed by a Mother Superior. And so she reads this letter and she says, this is not from a Mother Superior. This is from the Father Superior who was there, who took umbrage at the fact that I was making these comments. So she said it took her a month to reply. So she replies and she says, among the palms of applause are snakes. And she writes this whole thing up. Well, she wrote it in Spanish. So I had to translate it, because they were doing, Ms. Magazine, the women's magazine, had a whole story on this woman and the letter. So I read this story on her, and I did the translation, and they had an actress get on stage do this whole part. And this was during my very lean times. So I painted a Spanish mosaic on the floor, because it was a four-corner round. And she was in outfit, and it was just, she was walking into this very, very fancy, beautiful place. And all they would pay, they were giving me transportation money from my studio to the west side and back home. And I went to Actors Equity and I said, gosh, I'm having problems with money. And they said, what are you doing? I said, well, I've got Westbeth, I'm doing the Letter of Athena, and then I'm doing Sacraments at the theater off Park, and I have to design a whole set. And there was an actor, a very well-known actor, who asked me to design it. And so he said, so they said, so you're doing this? So they paid my rent and my phone. I thought, a win-win, you know? Because I was busy, I was working, I wasn't getting any money. I was just getting car fare. At the time, you had to just figure out how to survive. It wasn't even called survival. I mean, survival to me was being able to walk to the park, run the track, and interesting what the mind does visually. I used to have like crust of bread and stuff like that, and I used to go down, the West Side Highway is very high, and you look down on the river. And I used to take the pieces of stale bread, and I would stand back, and the seagulls would come. And I would throw a piece of bread out, and the seagulls would fly down, and the wharf rats would run at the same time and grab something. And the seagulls make this very plaintive cry. And it was almost like my voice. You know, to me, it sounded like me. You know, there's one piece, one crumb, and two people fighting for it. So it becomes a life story, in a sense. This is, when you talk about a history, there are things that happen that you have recollection because they're very powerful. Like the sound of seagulls. Like that fight for that little piece of morsel. It gives you an insight into life is a bit of a struggle. and things come your way that you have never expected. Never, you know, it's almost like I worked so hard to get to be able to buy a farm and a barn that was going to become my studio. It was 45 feet long, and I had done a restaurant in New York City. I painted, it was a restaurant called Jackalope. You know what Jackalope is? It's half antelope and half rabbit. And it was all this very kind of Tex-Mex food. The place was huge. And a friend of mine called me and said, I'm painting all these red walls like Sedona. And so would you like to paint, you know, a sunset sky on the ceiling? I guess Michelangelo did it, I guess I can do it too. And the money it was cash. So lying on my back, you know, painting ceilings. And I had enough money to put a roof on my barn. You know, and there it was, I had my barn, I bought a piece to lift the barn up, and every day I would lift up 1/4 of an inch to get it to straighten out. It was me, and it would creak. When you went up 1/4 of an inch, then you would stand back and you hear, you know, the beams were moving because they didn't use nails, it was all tongue and groove. And when I walked out on the field, it was hay, and the hay was up to my waist and higher. And all these wild apples that were so sweet and sour and tasty in a little brook. And if I walked past the brook, I could smell the mint, water mint. And it would come up, and I knew where I was. If I closed my eyes, I knew exactly where I had walked. And when it all went, the farm, the barn, everything, it was the most painful thing in my life. But I looked at my 2 kids, and we had rented a house because I had to wait a year. And I said to my son, we're going to sell everything. You get 25% of everything that you sell. And he was out on the lawn, running back and forth, and the cars would stop, and he was 6 years old. And he's talking to the customers, and he's got money in his pocket, and he's doing this, and they're carrying stuff away. That was the payoff. We're coming back. My daughter flew, and my son, myself, and my brother drove the truck. We stopped off right out of Florida, and there was this huge place of fireworks. I mean, huge. And Aaron said, Dad, can we stop off here? And I said, sure. He said, I got money. he had about $250. He walked out there. I said, you don't need me, right? He said, no, Dad, I can do this. Goes in, he comes back with these $250 worth of fireworks. You know, I thought, you know, it's just crazy. You know, the stuff that, and we lived in an apartment house for a year. And then we went house shopping. I didn't want a house. I was so, you know, I guess disappointed and hurt. I didn't want a house. I saw one, I didn't like it, and I told my sister, I don't want a house, I don't want a house. And then the realtor said, well, there's one more you should look at. The key is underneath the mat. So we walked in here, and I walked in here, and I saw the bookcase, and I said, I want it, I want the house. And I said to the guy, this is, can you drop it a couple of thousand? And he said, well, it's been on the market for 6 months. Yes. I said, good, good. I had saved every cent, because I got here, and a week later I was working. I was working with the kids. And I had a salary coming in. I saved every cent I could. And I had taken a class on buying a house with no money. You know, it's just, I mean, there's answers somewhere. And they said, yes, you can do it this way, do it that way. And all of a sudden, I have a house. You know, and my kids, you know, grew up around this neighborhood. And my son was a skateboard addict because that was his life. he got to be so popular at the emergency that I'd say, go ahead, Aaron, I'll park the car. And he'd walk in and she'd say, Aaron, you're here again. But he did that for about 3 years. He was happy, take him to the beach, doing his water thing. And it made me happy that he was happy. He was a good kid. But I saw signs of things that I didn't like because I could see it at the kids in school. And it took him a while. We made contracts. He had to sign them. And I hope this isn't taping. I'll tell you.
Oh, I can stop it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what happened. You can stop it for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so the major calls me, tells me, your son's up for one of the golden dozen. And I said, what is that? And they said, this is what it is. There's only 12 that are chosen, and he's one of them. They took me to Washington, they put me in the hotel, and I spent a week going to all the festivities that they do. I went to the White House. It was very big. For me, he proved himself. He got in, he said, Dad, I volunteer for everything. I drive a truck, I take the guys out to go water rafting. They pay all my rafting because I drive the truck and I make breakfast for the guys. I said, good for you. He said, and I've gone snowboarding, and I did this, and I helped put together a whole new set of television and videos for the guys. And he started telling me all this stuff, and he said, oh, and there was something about, they went rafting, and one of the guys fell overboard. And he grabbed them, and he pulled them on the raft. So all this stuff was documented, and therefore he was a candidate for the Golden Dozen. It was quite an event. They have all the top majors from all over the Air Force, from all over the world, come to this event, and they have these coins that they give, and it's a thing that the Air Force does. I don't know how many other, but they shake hands, and it was like a wedding. There's this whole line. There's the Golden Dozen up front. There's this whole line in a tent, and all these majors are coming and shaking hands, and when they shake hands, they put the coins in their hand. They're mementos. And it was incredible. They had to stop the majors from coming in because it was taking so much time. And we had a big dinner to go to. And I when they came through, and they shook hands with me as well, and then Aaron, oh yeah, see that little, on the keychain? Right there. This is what they gave me. They gave him a whole bunch of these different ones. Each country had a coin.
Wow.
And this guy says, here, you deserve this one.
Could you show it?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
It's really beautiful. So is he still in the Air Force?
He just got out last year.
Oh, great.
So when he was,
I know, yeah.
yeah, then
SpaceX.
SpaceX, yeah, because it's but you know, again, I don't know that to me, it's been a huge adventure, unexpected, lots of hurt, lots of pain, lots of tears, but lots of rewards. And I think that's what you have to. What I remember is that life is it's a lesson, it's a teaching, and I guess that's my great interest in education, because if you can inspire, if you can say to some kid, look, you don't know what's inside. I never knew what was inside of me either. I just wanted to do certain things that I don't know where they came from. Where do you come from, to become an artist, to become a painter? I went to the Art Students League to study. I was 50 years old when I went back to college. I had been a professional, making very good money in theater, in television, and being an artist for television and for the theater. But I had no degree. And I was working for Smith Corona and they're one of the oldest typewriter companies in the world. And they were moving to Mexico. And they asked me if I would go to Mexico and teach. And I said, no. I said, all these people are friends of mine. They're losing their jobs. I'm going to go to Mexico to teach what these people have been doing. Some of these people came with their grandfathers who started, this company. So they said, I said, so what are my options? They said, you want to go to school? And I said, yeah, you pay for it. And I went to a community college. And I got a degree in commercial art. I had been commercial artist all of my life. And I had been doing posters and designs and having hundreds of these things shipped all over the country. But I didn't have a degree. So I got a degree in computer graphics. Unfortunately, they weren't up to par with equipment. Everything was done in black and white because they couldn't afford color. But I got a degree. I got a degree, and I got a ribbon, a yellow ribbon from a tassel for my writing. And that to me was a big, big deal. I put together as my graduating event, I put together a group of writers, poets, and artists, and we published a book of poetry. And I was the director. And so that got me. By the way, I failed my art history course. It's like, just like, I thought, oh, I failed my art history, but I had a tassel, that I had gained from my hard work. And I can do anything with my hands and my head, but don't ask me to sit and memorize dates and details. It does, and I take the classes, I wrote 3x5s, I talked to my friends. And I have 4 or 5 books of art history. I thought the first thing I'm going to burn when I get out of the school is this $75 book, The Bonfire. But, I guess it's not a failure. You continue until you get to the next stage. To me, getting an award from the Writers Guild was incredible. Because it was something well done. We had to do it twice because the first time we got it, the editor did not edit correctly, and the teacher who we had feeded as the impact for this book said, I will not give you my name. You will take my name off that book if you keep it the way it is. And I thought, good hear. I wrote the word hoe, H-O-E, and they wrote H-O-W. And I thought, but life has its gives and takes. And writing is my passion. I do it because it keeps me on the straight and narrow. It tells me what is going on in my mind. For that moment something comes through, I write it. But I think I go back to the fact that when I was teaching, I had to teach the kids how to think. That to me was very important. Why is that curl on that leaf or that flower? Think about it. There's a whole bunch of them. Some are pointed, some are triangular, some are heart-shaped. Why? What do you think this is? Just to give them something to think about. Sometimes there doesn't seem to be enough information. Giving them a kid a computer or giving them a book. A book is better because when you turn the page, you read it, you've put information in there. If you're looking at pictures in a computer and it's just information, don't Google it. You're going to be there all day. Just take a walk in the park. And you can smell the grass, smell the air, feel the rain, see the shapes. That's important. That's what teaching is about. It's a demonstration of life. It's not your toes, your fingers running across the keyboard. I write longhand. Nowadays, nobody can read it. My kids don't particularly like when I write longhand, but I always write it because it's easier for me to write longhand than to do the up and down. It's just, and I don't have the computer is too slow for me. Yeah. It's very important because longhand also taught me how to use lines. If I stand you in a corner and I tell you, here's that wall, here's a piece of chalk, stand in one place and use your hand and start at the bottom and go all the way around, you should be able to come right down to where you started. I said, there's a ball in here. It allows you to do this. Okay. And I used to tell my students, I can teach you how to make the perfect circle with a pencil, your finger, and a piece of paper. And you can do it. And I'm going to teach you, and when you go home, you tell your brother or your sister that for a quarter, you'll make them a perfect circle without using a compass. Yeah, really? The quarter was the incentive. I said, you hold the pencil here, you put your fingertip down, and then what you do is you turn the paper. You don't have to do anything else. And if you did it correctly, you'll get it. And they loved that. I had a bunch of senior citizens that I taught that. They had a break in their class. And they said, I'm going to go home and give my grandchildren. If something so simple, but it was incentive. And I said, okay, now you move your finger and you keep doing this, and you'll have all these sentences. And if you push the pencil back, you'll have a smaller circle. Push the pencil back, you have a smaller circle. Pull it all the way out, you have a big circle. And you can have a whole bunch of perfect circles. Just be patient and keep that finger in the same place. It's the pencil that moves and the paper that moves. To me, it's how do you take somebody who doesn't seem to... I can't do a straight line with a ruler. That's what you get from most of the students. One of my students walked in one day and she said, I'm not the artist in my house, my brother is. I said, you get an A for being here today. That A stays there. I want you to come in every day, listen, do the best you can, and your A stays. As long as you try, you'll get it. One day I'm walking past her desk and she has all these doodles. And I said, do you do this a lot? She said, yes, sometimes I get angry. And I just sit and I doodle. Or I'm on the phone, I doodle. I said, okay, let me see those. And I had a big panel, fabric panel. And I said, I want you chalks. I want you to take these chalks, they're all pastels. I want you to take one of these doodles and I fill the whole thing up with doodle. It was about 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep. She did it and I said, okay, now you're going to go around to the back, you're going to slap this fabric down like a canvas. And I said, most of the color will come off, but you keep your designs. I'm going to teach you how to mix paint. I get white paint and I got your primary colors, and I said, you mix a little bit of this paint with the white. You have all these little buckets and all these brushes. Now I want you to duplicate the colors you used on the panel. For the next 2 weeks, that's all you do. You come in, you go to the back, you paint. And I said, don't worry about anybody else because they have other things to do. She finished it, and 2 teachers wanted to buy it. And there was a Dr. Isabela. He works in Orlando, or used to. And he had a program where he took a student to South America with him as an assistant. He came to the school, and they said, oh, Mr. Saavedra, Dr. Saavedra is here, he's looking for a student. And I said, make sure you bring him to my classroom. And I said, you're looking for an assistant? I said, I have a bilingual student who's very good, and I think she's your perfect candidate. He talked to her. There was a group that was coming up with the money for her to go, and there was a dinner, and she got to go, and her parents got to go. And he took her to South America, and the father found enough money for the mom to go for the 2 weeks. It was just, to me, it's just, she listened. I didn't push her. I just said, do this, this is the stage. The stages. But being aware of some talent and just saying, you can do this. I think I taught, what I taught her was how I think. If I do it in stages, it'll be easier for her to do it, because that's how I learn. I learn in stages. And, you know, to me it was just, it had to happen that way. Because she had the opportunity. There was nobody to criticize, there was nobody to, it was just follow this, do this. And one of the teachers did mine, to give her $100 for this picture. $100 to a teenager is a lot of money.
So what was the difference between, because you were teaching in New York before we moved down here, right? So what's the difference between, or how did New York schools compare to Florida schools?
It was, the comparison is huge, but because one of my first reactions to Florida school was that I was assisting a teacher, and he said, and the man, the explorer, his name was Ponce de Leon, and I thought, I studied with European Americans who knew that it was Ponce. I've got this guy standing here telling them that it's Ponce. It's not the same. And I started to open my mouth and I thought, no, it's not important, because he's a teacher here. And he said, it's Ponce. So Ponce it remains. I thought, there's a problem with the teaching. And I found ways of dealing with the lack, because I have my lacks too. When it comes to math, my son must have gotten all the points that I was supposed to get. But I wasn't good at math. And I had a student that came in from a white boy from a white family, clean nails, nice clean clothing, well-spoken, got in trouble somehow and ended up in my school. That's what they do. And I said to him, I tell you what you're going to do. I'm going to give you your A+ right now. You're going to teach my math class. I'm going to sit in the back because I have to make notes of responses around the room. He said, to deal. Every day we got to class. He had a good manner, and I said, he's a teacher now. He's going to teach you this. And he probably can explain it to you better than I can. So pay attention. And I'm in the back, and I want you to ask questions if you have a doubt. And you know, it's how to make it work. But I had a job. And I think that the northern schools are much more, because I studied in northern schools. How did I get to learn so quickly without any special education? There was no special ed. There was no bilingual class. I thought, how does that happen? That you get into, but teachers, very important. I had an English teacher, and she said, wonderful woman. She took me to the first Broadway performance I had ever seen. She took about 6 of us to see Major Barbara by George Bernard Shaw, which I knew nothing about. But we sat in the audience, and the curtains opened up, and there was scenery, and there's actors. And it was my first reaction to live theater. I didn't hear a thing they said. You know, I was everywhere. And the movement, the lights, the colors, everything was so amazing. But she said to me, I tell you what you're going to do. I want you to work on your speaking. What you do is you read the New York Times. You do not read the Daily News. And she said, when you read the New York Times, read it out loud and cup your ear and listen to your sound of your voice. And it was interesting because all of a sudden I thought, wow, it works. I can hear myself speak. And it sounds like somebody else speaking through my head. But the idea was that I would catch my faults much quicker if I was cupping my ear. And I don't even know that that's even done. Or that, you know, it worked for me. But apparently she was a very astute young woman. And she knew what she was talking about. And she said, oh, and by the way, when you read New York Times, you have a piece of paper or a pad and a pencil and a dictionary. And you write everything that you do not understand. This was in high school. You know, that kind of attention makes a big impact on a student. And to me, that's, oh, and listen, I always liked music, so I joined the chorus. The woman was a lanky Midwesterner, long, thin woman with long, thin fingers, gray, woolly hair, wore loose clothing with simple patterns. And she could bang that piano and make it sound like it was an orchestra. And she taught us Handel's Messiah. And she called us her birds. And she'd bang on the piano in her big floppy shoes. And she would work with us separately. When she did a performance, when everybody was together, it was amazing. She took us to a hospital for seniors, a hospital for seniors, to sing Messiah. The place was packed. When we got finished with Messiah, the audience was crying, and the students were crying. It was the most incredible feeling. And the people, and they were just having problems. They're doing this for applause, and they're yelling for encore. To me, and then we did a Kiwanis club, and we started, and all of a sudden she went, and everybody stopped. Because we knew if she did this, wherever you were, you had to stop. And she took her stick, and she went on the podium, and she turned to the audience, and she said, we sing, and after we sing, you eat. Or you eat and we do not sing. And quiet. You know, and that she had a presence about her. But it was important. I mean, all of a sudden I know this man, Handel. You know, I knew Wagner. I had gone to the opera house, the old opera house, and stood in the back. Because a friend of mine said, you had to see this. This woman is the most incredible singer in the world. Birgit Nilsson. You know, and it's those events that happen in your life that are isolated, but each one is a stepping stone to something. You know, and I work at the Metropolitan Opera House, and it's Marc Chagall is the artist. He's a designer, and he's everywhere at the same time. And his sketches are in this vault, and they bring them out, and they give them to you, and you get a sketch. And you have to take that piece of fabric. They built bodies that the actors or the singers had to use, and you had to trace and color all the pieces that Chagall had done onto that fabric, so that when it was finished, it was Chagall drawing. And meanwhile, they're piping Mozart's music all over the audience, all over the shops, the workshops. It was so amazing that Chagall, we were all meeting on the stage because the dragon, in the beginning, there's a dragon that's killed, and Chagall had designed this big dragon, and it was hoops, but you can't cut it down because it's hoops. You can't make it smaller, because if you cut a hoop, everything falls apart. And but his assistant says to the milieu of the high to-dos at the Metropolitan House, he says, Monsieur Chagall's shoe is untied, in English, and everybody looks down, and Chagall is standing there. And everybody's waiting for who is going to kneel down and tie his shoelace. This is the master, Marc Chagall. And one of the not so higher ups got down and tied his shoelace. And he said, merci. So my French is very limited. But I was working in the opera, the Queen of the Night, there's all this forest with all these creatures and lions and all this. Chagall was great. Have you ever seen the Chagall paintings? There's donkeys and horses and goats all floating in the air. So he designed this part of the forest like his drawings. So they did for the actors these head dresses. And it's very hard to look at something where the holes in the eyes are there. But he designed them, we had to cut them back. And I was working on a lion because the king, or Sarastro, is brought in on a cart, not a cart, but drawn by lions. And I'm working on the lion, and he comes by, and I'm kneeling down, and he comes over, and he goes like this, and he said, "Le chien c'est belle." I thought, chien? Dog. Belle is pretty. I said, that's a drawing, that's a lion. But he tapped me on the head and thought I got a blessing of Chagall, because I did. But, you know, those little tiny things, and he used to draw little sketches on little pads, and then he'd tear them, throw it on, and 40 people would jump. I thought, you know, this is embarrassing. You know, the man was in his 80s at the time. When the production was performed, I saw the rehearsal, and the whole backdrop was a Chagall painting with people in Chagall painted clothing. If you look at this 40-foot piece with the people are down here and the rest of it is all space, you could not tell the actors from the scenery, because it was one massive Chagall painting. And there's, you know, tabards, those long pieces of fabric. The Metropolitan Opera House has 3 of them that were on the front of the Opera House, and they're stored somewhere now. But that was to me, I didn't particularly like his work. But years later, I get to do Fiddler on the Roof, and Fiddler on the Roof has the Chagall motif. You know, and so it comes in and out. So then, you know, Franco Zeffirelli. Okay, Franco was the first one who decided that Romeo and Juliet are teenagers. They're not these 40-year-old English actors and actresses. So he does his movie on Romeo and Juliet. It's brilliant. They're teenagers. That passion, that love, that madness is in youth. And so he does his incredible film. Well, he was also a great director. He was a designer. And he gets to do Antony and Cleopatra at the Metropolitan Opera House. The most lavish performance, production ever. They were afraid, because he has a reputation for surprising people, that he had elephants and camels hidden somewhere, that he was going to bring them in for Cleopatra's entrance. But he designed a brilliant performance. His drawings were this thick. It was a piece of plywood with a figure, and then there were pieces of fabric. Each costume weighed about 60 pounds. The soldiers wore these huge, it was leather and gold and chain, and it was just build up on build up on build up. And he designed them all. And he designed the scenery, designed everything, and also he was the director. And Samuel Barber was the musician. He wrote the music. It was atonal. It's so bad that I have Zeffirelli's biography. It doesn't mention the production. It doesn't mention Antony and Cleopatra. It doesn't mention, it's like it never existed. And I bought the book because I thought, I want to see what he says about this, because it was a total failure. And to have a failure at the Metropolitan Opera House, it's got to be a big one. But, and he apparently had a big out with Samuel Barber. Leontine Price was the female singer. He designed a headdress for her that was this big. And she couldn't turn her head, she had to turn her whole body. That wig was this big. They brought somebody from Europe, a wig maker, to create this huge amount, and her whole body costume. But it was sad, because it was brilliantly done. All the armor, the soldiers, everything. It was the same time when Caesar's Palace opened up. in Vegas, and that whole thing with the leather straps and everything else. And we worked on that, and we worked on the opera. But you see this and you think, wow, you know. But I guess because when I worked for Shakespeare Festival, he did Shakespeare in the Park, and that was brilliantly done. We did Peer Gynt, which was a beautiful production, and there was an Oriental by the name of Ming Cho Lee who's teaching a couple of years ago in Connecticut. He was a great designer. In the play, there's a mountain, and he created the whole mountain in steel, in pipes, so that it would turn. As he's running up the mountain, he's always in view, but he's always getting higher, and the mountain is turning. And then inside the mountain is Gint's mother, Hahalo. And this is out in the open air. So the idea that this man, you know, the brilliance, and there was the director, by the name of Gerald Friedman, he sat us down in this oval table and he said, "This is my concept of the Troll King and his people. They have to be beautiful, but they have to be ugly as well." So we had to make all these body parts that twisted the faces. One, there's a woman by the name of Olympia Dukakis. She's of the Dukakis family, and she's an actress. And she was a young woman then. And he said, I want Olympia to have 3 breasts. So they made a copy of one of her breasts. They put one in the middle, because these are all trolls, and they all have some quirk. So there she comes, and there was 2 girl dancers who were in one outfit. One woman with 4 legs, 2 women with 4 legs, but they were joined, like at the hip or something. And all of this, it was so brilliant that the New York Times said that the costumes should have gone to the Smithsonian. Because the Troll King comes in with a 70-foot round cape, carried by 2 men dressed like horses. And they had bodysuits and green hair that hung. So when they walked, all this hair did this.
So how long did you work in theater work?
I did 3 seasons.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was in and out of the theater.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
but just like broadly.
Yeah. I did. The theater was mostly. I started out with the Shakespeare Festival.
Okay.
And that was probably in the 60s.
Okay.
Because I went from there, from Shakespeare, to the Opera House, to doing the All-American musical.
Okay.
And I just kept going in and out, depending on the season: summer season, winter season.
Gotcha.
But I think that for me, the learning process, the creation, it was the fact that at Shakespeare Festival we had so many brilliant minds, artists, who could take a piece of play and turn it into something quite brilliant to look at. You know, I mean, all of a sudden you're working on a feathered costume for a big muscle-bound black man who's playing God's dove up on a steeple, and we had to use white terry cloth that had just been cut, and when he used in the lights, when he used to like go like this, it would all float in the wind like he was molting. You know, it was just the things that they designed. You're thinking, wow, who thought of this?
So when did you start creating like the pieces that were sitting, like when did you start painting again?
Yeah. That was before when I got married the second time.
Mm-hmm.
I started painting again. Because I'd been working. I'd left Stiller and Mira and went on to painting. I left American Theater Productions, went with Stiller and Mira. I did some television work, and then I tell you, let me just see something here, because I looked at this last night, and there's all kinds of dates on here.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, let's see. Da-da-da-da. Okay, so, okay, let's see, Metropolitan Opera House, Samuel Barber, Zeffirelli, Chagall, residency at Adelphi University's dance department, that's that big piece. 3 seasons of summer stock, All-American musical and design theater posters and literature for touring companies. Art director on a film and television series, plus 2 seasons with Stiller and Mira. Followed scenes from life. During this time and travels in and out of city, I became aware of the other side of the footlights and began, making sketches and mixed media pieces that became my stage. All of a sudden, all this stuff I had learned became, I started looking at the world and the drama that was out in the world. I started looking at everything, by the way, everything I had designed was big because I came out of the theater. And the mentality was it has to be read from the 20th row in. So that, that's why I liked this painting so much, because it was big, it was huge. And I have, there were some that I did, there were triptychs, big pieces. Let's see. All right, up until 2001 when I moved to Florida, I got one of the pieces that's not here. Is Miners at your shop? Miners?
No.
No, that must be in storage.
That was
No, I know
Brothers.
it's in yeah, she got it. Okay, but okay. So I got a whole bunch. I'll give you this.
Okay.
Because basically,
That'd be great.
okay. And here's the.
You would say it was from the 80s on?
Yeah.
From the 80s to the 2000s?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And this is the second part, and this is
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that'd be great.
okay.
Because I try to write biographies, so.
Yeah. Okay.
That's, from there, it's nice to have dates.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have
The letter.
Yeah, and you have and you sent over in the packet, it has your resume too.
Do you have my resume, or is that the big one, the big biography?
In the
With dates.
proposal for Keepers of Heritage, we have the whole biography and
Okay.
your resume.
So okay, so that
Yeah,
it has all the dates and everything else on there.
Yeah.
Because basically, at this point, it's a lot of time to remember.
No, I get it. I was just.
Yeah, I remember names and faces,
Yeah.
but dates, numbers,
That's fine.
uh,
That's the less important stuff. It's better than just remembering the dates and not knowing names. of people.
remember that now, in November I'll be 80, and that's a long time to think.
So you mentioned, obviously the surrounding context of why you moved to Florida, but why did you pick Central Florida?
At the time, I needed to get out of upstate New York. I had no house. All I had was 2 kids. My mom was still alive. My sister lives here, and my brother Tommy lives here. So, and I had to get a letter from them saying that I was going to get a job. My sister and my brother-in-law own a jewelry store. They've been in it for 26 years in Kissimmee. And so they wrote a letter saying, and at the time they needed a manager, that I would manage the store. Well, while they were trying to figure that out, I went to all the schools here and with my resume and gave them my resume. And I got a job in Florida, in Orlando, and then I realized that I would have to drive, they would have to find a place for Aaron because he was too small in their school, or if not, I would have to drive to a school in Orlando, drop him off, go to work, and then do the same thing on the way back. And I had dropped a resume right here in Kissimmee. And the woman called me and she said, "Can you come?" And I already accepted the other job. And she said, I said, I have a problem, I need a place for my son. She said, no big deal. She said, we're working on refurbishing one of those portables. And I said, where? And they said, it's right here. So I went to the woman and I said, look, I got time on my hands. I'll help build. I'll paint, I'll do whatever you need. And she said, you won't have to do that. We're already taking care of it. So I found a place for him, and I called the other place and I said, sorry, I can refuse the job. it was like 7 minutes from here to school. You know, and of course, it was a job, and it was something I could do, something I was interested in, and it paid my rent, which was important, and food. And until the time that I could, you know, do this, but I went right into. I was lucky because they needed males in special education. All the teachers that they had were females, and as it turned out, I got to work here in Kissimmee, and the teacher that I am that I'm assisting, I become a substitute teacher full time because he got sick, and I had already been working with the class for about 6 weeks, and they said, Mr. Feliciano, we'd like to give you the substitute teacher. I had no credentials, but they knew what I had done, so I just walked right into the job, and it worked out for me. It worked out for me because while I was substituting, I went into one of the classrooms, and some of these guys were tough. They were thugs, especially the older kids. And it was a reading class, and I opened up a book, and the lesson was on Victorian England and manners, and I thought, I'm going to get these books thrown at me. They're not going to take all this. These guys, they come in and want to sleep the first class of the day. And so I said, put your heads down, close your eyes, I'll be right with you. And I thumbed through the book, and I found The Pit and the Pendulum. I said, okay, keep your eyes closed. I'm going to start reading. Listen to what I read, because I'm going to stop, and you're going to tell me, where is this happening? What does the place look like? What's going on? I read for about 8 minutes. I said, okay, open your eyes. Where is this happening here? And they all had questions. I said, there's a rock that he drops. Why did he drop the rock in that hole in the dark that he found? I said, what was he waiting for? Yeah, I know. He was waiting to see how long it took for the rock to hit ground. They got so enthusiastic, I said, okay, now you're going to read the rest of the book. You, then you, then you, then you. And they said, okay, Mr. Feliciano, you're coming back tomorrow. You know, to me it was, you know, it's how to quickly come up with a solution, because look at your audience. If I had started reading the book on Victorian England, they would have thrown the books at me. And I thought, what is this lady doing, reading this kind of thing to these thugs? You know, this is curriculum. This is not. Curriculum is dependent on who you're teaching. You can't teach the same curriculum to everybody. You know, but I guess what I was getting to is that I was a good teacher. That to me was the important thing, was not to get beat up. I did get my car keyed, you know, once. I had it fixed, but if they liked you or they didn't. If they didn't like you, they made your life miserable. You know, and yes, there were times when I thought they had some of the teachers had a habit of coming in and then saying, I can't deal with the rest of the day. And so I was the runaround. I was a substitute. You go into this class, you take care of it. That's the, first of all, the teachers in Florida pay very poorly. You spend more time with paperwork than necessary. You cannot exercise too much creativity. To me, you can exercise it and compact it and make it teachable. But you can't take all that information. At the same time, you're keeping note of what the reaction is, what the lessons are. That's a time. We used to have an assistant in every class who did nothing but take notes. They closed it off and they put the assistants in the hallway. They only came in if you went like this, you're having problems. And that doesn't help anybody, because you get the kids who are smart, and I put them up front. And I'd say, I want you to work with so-and-so. Oh, no, you're going to work with so-and-so, I'll have you both in front. You know, it was just a way of making it work for them, because They had to graduate. And by the way, at ESE in Florida, you can keep them till they're 21. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 21 years old. We had a girl who came out of the streets. She was 21 years old. And she came in and she was a rapper. A big, heavy, chunky rapper. And she would just, the light went on and she was on stage. And she started rapping. And then one of the boys would take and say, I challenge you. And now you've got a rapping contest coming in your classroom. And when they'd say, today, so-and-so's not coming in, she called in and said, oh my God. But the woman I was working with, she said, I think I got it fixed. She called Valencia and she found out there was a program that this woman could take. We got rid of her because she had to be in an environment with adults. She was 21 years old. She'd run the streets for years. She wasn't going to, unfortunately, you got to make those provisions to begin with. You can't put somebody in there that's in the wrong place because they're not learning, and nobody else is either. I think I'm speaking out of turn, but if you have special education classes, you have to think about the fact that the little ones ride the buses with the big ones. They're learning all the bad stuff. They can't afford to have special buses for the little kids. So you have the kids and the high schoolers all in the same boat. It's like sending a kid to prison. When they get out, they know a lot more than they did when they went in, because it's about survival. And I think it's the same thing about these children. I wish, at one point, they asked me if I would join the education committee, and I thought, it's going to be a war. I don't know how to keep my mouth shut. It's not something, they don't want to hear. They just want to keep it the way it is. Everybody makes, especially in that echelons, makes a decent living. You go to a meeting and you think, is this a private school? You're giving me all these directions for teaching? It's not a private school. This is a school out of the streets. And I was very polite. I never used foul language. Once I said, put your ass down. Oh, you said, I said, I know what I said. Is it any different than some of the stuff that you come up with? Just put your butt down and listen. But you have to be very careful. Middle years are very rough on teachers. The middle school is the worst. They are young, they're full of hormones, and they can't keep their hands off each other. And it's sad. We don't have enough counselors. Counselors cannot counsel. That's not their job. They push paper. I hope you're going to edit some of this, because some of this.
Well, we don't edit anything, but I mean, there's really nothing that you said that I think is really objectionable.
It's just because they don't want to hear the fact that this is, you cannot counsel, because if you counsel somebody, even if you have a degree in psychology or psychiatry, if they're paying for your advice is one thing. If you're telling young people, you cannot tell a young girl, do you take the pill? You cannot say that, because you're promoting sexuality. I went to a session where a woman who was a psychiatrist had to rush to a classroom that a child was having a fit, a breakdown. She finally got to the classroom, and she said to the child who had been put in a straitjacket, "What's the matter?" She said, "Something inside me moved." She was pregnant. I sat there and I thought, God, it's like, what a terrible thing. This child is 14 years old, and something inside her moves, and she goes into a panic. So it's 6 of one, half of the other. You can't tell, can't say anything. You can't, if a child is pregnant, you cannot, if you haven't been told by somebody up there. I knew about it because all the kids in the classroom did. But they were having a bus drill, and she jumped out of the back of the bus and fell on her knees, and I went to the office and I said, you have to call an ambulance and see if this child is okay because she's pregnant. You can't. How do you know? I said, don't worry about how I know. You better find out if she's okay.
So why did you decide to stop teaching?
They stopped it. They just stopped they stopped the programs that I was most. I wanted to teach my way. I had, to me, you should have a lot of common sense when you teach. Who are you teaching? What do they know? To me, teaching is to help people learn, and in a sense, learn to cope. A lot of information doesn't make you a professor. Transferring that information from one person to the other if it doesn't make any difference to them, except information, it serves no purpose. Teaching has to have a purpose, that's what I'm saying. It has to have a purpose because, if you're a psychologist, psychiatrist, you're a doctor, there's a purpose to help people get well, or to advise them on how they can do it, or what medications they can take, or what they can't. But it has to have a purpose. Teaching facts is not going to change anything unless they're relevant to that lifestyle. So I get my thoughts together and my anger sometimes.
So when you moved down here, did you start, what was the Puerto Rican community like at the time? You mentioned in New York that you felt very disconnected.
Yeah.
When you moved down here, did you start spending more time with the local Puerto Rican community?
Not really, because basically, coming from a family that I do, my brother was in the Marines. He had a family of his own, big family. My sister has one son. She is retired. Her husband plays golf 3 days a week. She volunteers at the Senior Citizen Center, on Meals on Wheels. Everybody is connected and disconnected. We don't have a group of Hispanics sitting together. Every once in a while, there's some kind of family affair of some kind, but we all have separate lives and separate needs and separate jobs. And so that everybody's, I'm still right where I was before. This is my only connection is Angel and the people. Because basically, one of the members, Alejandro de Jesus, he gets on the phone with, we were in a car, we were coming back from you, and he said something about, he turns to me and he says, so Jose, did you read Kant? And I said, no, but I could. And that set up a whole thing about Kant and could. I got home, I went online, and I thought, I guess I missed him. I said, but read Sophocles, and I went through in my head everybody I had read, and Freud, and I thought, okay, so but that made me think about what I had learned, and what all these books mean to me, and I thought, okay, I missed one. I said, but you haven't read Tolstoy, you haven't read Anna Karenina from beginning to end, A War and Peace. And then that's when I was thinking, gosh, I've done it. I've done everything I needed to do for a degree. But but I thought I was looking to find out what was I been doing all this time? But I don't have that much, I have more connection now because Angel is very literate in Spanish and in English. And he brought from Puerto Rico the top masters, the people who've been in the business 50 years and more, and they're called maestros. And when you look at the work that they have done, and you look at the fact that they're workers all over Europe, the Europeans buy, Angel told us, they used to go to Puerto Rico to buy art. And he sold a whole bunch of stuff that he sold them in Puerto Rico. His problem was he sold it there. He sold so much of it. Then he gets to Florida, and we were saying before, nobody wants to buy. Nobody's buying. But he earned a very good living, and Pablo Rubio, he's the guy with the biggest sculpture in the world, and it's so big that people have weddings underneath it. And it's lit up at night. It's called the Northern Star. But these are and so we're sitting in a hotel in Ocala at night, listening to these masters like they did in the old days when the teacher, and they taught most of the people who were good who came out of Puerto Rico. So I didn't have that connection. It's not unfortunate. I just didn't have the connection to the literary connection, and the connection to the arts in Puerto Rico. I didn't have that until I met these people, and this stuff is. I was amazed how beautiful, how big, how successful they are. And they all have degrees, the top degrees. Some of them studied in Spain, some in the United States, some in Chicago. So the world, and one of the most famous of the Puerto Rican painters went from Puerto Rico to France to study with the Impressionists. His name is Francisco Oller. Oller, and he went from Puerto Rico, and he was a court painter for Spain. So it was not an isolated island away from culture. They had just gone the Spanish route from Puerto Rico to Spain. But a lot of the people in the group now, they studied at Pratt. They studied at the Art Students League. They studied in Chicago at the Chicago Institute of Art. So I didn't know these people.
So how did you become involved then?
My daughter graduates from Osceola School of the Arts. She does a presentation, and a man who was involved with us saw it, and I guess he was part of he gave her the whatever it was to go to Ringling for the summer. And he said, what he told me was that he said, if she's that good of an artist, her father must be pretty good. And then he said, it took me 2 years to find you. Well, he found me. We started doing some work, but unfortunately, myself and Angel and some of the others have been doing professional work for so long, and that we had greater expectations. And for us, this was not helping us to move ahead. It was just doing weekend shows and things like that. All of a sudden, we have Angel, and he starts to, and the man didn't want to run it anymore. He was looking for somebody to do it for him. And I said, I'm not going to do this. And so he gets elected. Well, the youngest brain in the group was the smartest. But he got us to Ocala, got us to Crealdé, got us to upcoming another museum, and then we're still looking at museums in in Florida. Anyway, more museums, and also Puerto Rico, because he goes there, and all his teachers, who are these members from Puerto Rico, taught at the university, and some are still teaching, and they welcomed. They said, "We'll do everything we can to." So we got an approval from one of the museums. But to me, it was like, okay, now we know where we're going. Now it's worthwhile to put all this work and all this time. We don't want to do weekend shows. It's worthless. I had decided everything that goes out has to be in a brochure. We have to have all the biographies on everybody. We have to know where you went to school, because this is what impresses, this is what the museums are looking for. Not Sunday painters. They want to know that you have a trajectory behind you. Where did you study? Where did you work? Where have you shown? And that became the impetus, plus the fact that he's a real good writer. So his proposals are very intact. And so we have, and then of course the shows that he's been doing at the barbershop. we opened there, and we have a bunch of people. He's also got an alternative place to show pictures, which is a restaurant 2 blocks away, and the walls covered with paintings. So his outreach is very community-minded. The restaurant is very Hispanic food, and the barber shop is community. Everybody walks in. Everybody walks in, and they bring their kids, and the wives, bring their children, or they come with the husbands. So there's always a dialogue going on about what's there. And that's, to me, it's like what teaching is about. It's like reaching out and touching people, and being there, and being able to explain something. He's got a show coming up, and he went to Connecticut to find all this work, to bring it to Florida. He just read the proposal to me this morning for this man. There's a lot that's going on, and to me, our hope is that as we grow, we keep using our contacts and our knowledge to spread out. And we had the idea of just starting a school, opening up a school, and just saying, bring your kids. Because Osceola Arts used to do it a lot. They stopped. I think they had one art class. We could have done all summer art, between sculpture and painting, and we get bilingual kids. Kids last year, which was the last time I taught, we got a lot of kids who had just come in with the onslaught of immigration. They couldn't speak English. So I can just say, I can speak in Spanish, I can sit a bilingual kid with this one and get them to do that. That's what Florida needs right now. Florida needs people like our group to reach out, because it's going to change the mentality. Art and music are still the most important mind openers for people. You see, you don't have to be of a different ethnicity to hear a good piece of music. I don't know German. I love Wagner music. It's a loop sometimes. Everybody say, "Why do you listen to that screechy music?" I happen to like it. I like the sound. I don't hear it as screechy. I Polonaise. I mean, it's there. It's music. I have a record player. I have a CD player in there, and I have one of those little modern drums that you can just plug your music in, because I'm in 3 different centuries.
So what is your personal painting process when you decide what's the inspiration for your pieces? How do you start the process?
My inspiration is still, I don't watch television anymore, but I read the news. I look at the world news on the computer, and I see, okay, let's see. Okay, would you hand that one to me? I'm still between 2 things. Is one, world news, okay. This is a sketch. Okay, this is a sketch for Mexico. It's just a sketch. And I'm very, sometimes it gets me into trouble. I'm very socially conscious. It doesn't matter who it's being done to. I think that it causes disharmony in the people, and I think it's wrong. It's important to see that injustice is being done, and so I do it the best way I can. It's a good thing I don't get on soapboxes very often on the street, because I'd probably be put in jail. But I do it the way I see it. This is how I see it. There's a painting inside. It had feet. It had a foot. It's just in the red room, and it has some photographs, and it has some other things, and it's about justice. It's about justice, about divorce and things like that. And it's sometimes, when I was looking at getting a divorce, I went online to find out what the men were saying, and I thought, This is a bitch session by guys who are pissed. None of them is saying, I'm responsible for this, I want this, I want that. You can sit there and bang your drum all day long and say nothing. And I thought, I need some real solutions. There's a book called Dispensable Dad, which I read. And then I saw a film. And I watched as many of the more positive books or stories about males who wanted their children. And I took a route that made me intelligent to be able to stand in a court of law and be very glib. But it took my writing letters to newspapers. It took for me to analyze who I am, what I've done, what I haven't done, so that I could present a package to the court like an honest human being who loves his kids. That's, all those years of teaching taught me something. It taught me that the grandparents raising the children, that was not the correct way. But, so my concern with the social issues are very important. I don't have any answers, but I think every human being has a right to use their own common sense. I never grew up with people calling me spick or anything like that. We didn't, I knew the words for the French and the Germans and the Jews and all that, but we never used them. It was not important. And also it was important not to insult anyone, to use that as a way to throw something at somebody. That was ugly. And I thought, no, we all deserve to be respected. Doesn't matter where you come from. And I used to have a very funny, while teaching, I always had some kid who would come over and say, hey, so-and-so gay? And I said, huh? What? Oh, so-and-so gay. I said, why? Are you interested? Conversation closed. That was the end of it. I thought, no, don't come looking for ammunition. You're talking to the wrong person. That's none of your business. So drop it. Because it's so easy, and I think it comes from insecurity. It comes from this feeling of insecurity and feeling like, you're better. No one is better. We all have skeletons in the closet. Leave people alone. Mind your business. Be kind. I think Buddha, one of the teachings of Buddha is compassion. Be compassionate. It's important to be compassionate. You get a lot further than to be finding fault. But I look for. I'm reading something on painting and the fact that a lot of it there's a change in the painting many years ago when abstract was very popular, but that painters had forgotten the old painters, the mythologies, the stuff that you can do something different, something new with a purpose. But don't discard, don't discard the building because it's old. Find out what's still there, what's in the framework that's important. And it goes for art, goes for music. How many, I can remember by the first couple of beats of a piece of music, immediately, I know what follows. If I think of Shakespeare and I think, he loved my mother so he might not redeem the winds of May caress her face too harshly. That to me was so telling, because it's something very, very interesting, very honest, that there are very good lessons to be learned and things to absorb. I cannot remember, especially I don't listen to rap, those that do it, fine. I don't have to subject myself to it. It's like parents, and most parents would say rock and roll, that's the devil's music. Well, there was a lot of good music written during that time, and it's so popular. But in life, you pick and choose. I can get a bunch of kids together to do some drawing and listen to a piece of music. I did Kandinsky, just because, it was music, and he used music as an impetus. There's a lot that we can use. I've been using this. I have a piece that I'm working on that's really rough because it's in rough. I thought the idea that the man and the child that were found on the beach, to me that was very moving. It was painful to watch, and then I thought, as a parent, what do you do to send the child out into the world, into the mess that it is in, or you sacrifice it, and to me it was, you put a child in a basket and you put it into the river, and an Egyptian woman finds him and makes him her own. To me so I'm working on that premise, except that I'm turning it, I think, because I was a single father, and it changed my whole personality of what a man is. And a man is to be respected like a woman is respected, or should be respected. Because you can be many things, but deep down inside, you've got feelings, you've got heart, you hurt, you cry. All these things. All the things that were considered weaknesses. Well, you have all these weaknesses, and where does it get you? To commit suicide because you can't cope anymore with your feelings. Because you're not expected to be that way. And you do the best you can. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are. You do the best you can, and do it honestly. And it made me think that we expect, women are strong. Women have always been strong. They had to carry the torch when the fire was going out. And to me, and people say, oh, you won in court, and I said, yes. But it didn't happen like that. They didn't hand it to me and say, here. No, it took a lot of convincing, a lot of writing, a lot of thinking, a lot of my reserve that I didn't even know that I had. All I can think of is that my children's mom did me a favor. She turned me into a better man by forcing me to think beyond. And she said to my daughter, I'm sorry that I wasn't the mom that you should have had. And she remarried, and she's very happy in Colorado. But she admitted after all this that she couldn't take care of it. But I had to fight the fight, because there were 5 lawyers. 5 lawyers involved. 5 lawyers in 2 years. And they said, how did you do it? I said, I don't even think you asked. There were days when I just said, how long? How much further? How much? And I'm a better person because I went through it. I'm a better human being. I had no idea that I had it in me. Maybe a better person, maybe more conscious of the need. There was a kid in school who fell off a second balcony and broke both arms. He was about 9 years old. And I was wearing my badge, and I was at Publix, and this woman said to me, oh, you're teaching at that school? You must know my neighbor's kid. He has 2 broken arms. And I said, I couldn't say yes. And I said, wow. She said, well, that kid? He comes to my house and sits with my daughter to watch television all the time. But he's always on his own. And he fell off the balcony. And she said, I told the mother that I would adopt him. because I felt that he was such a poor, lonely kid. And I thought, wow, I felt the same way when I saw this kid coming in with two arms like this. I thought, that's painful. That you want to say to this kid, or say to the mom, I'll take him from you. You know, it wouldn't be a big hardship. I'm not being the best human being in the world, but I'm not being the worst either. And sometimes the aches and pains teach you what it means to hurt from somebody else's point of view. You know, so I don't know what kind of answers anybody has. All I know that mine were long and hard, and it's worth the price. That's the long, you know. It's better than anger. The forgiveness came. I thought, hey, she's happy, good, excellent, because everybody deserves to be happy. I'm happy. Why shouldn't she be happy? You know. My kids are doing well. They got lives, and we kind of need to help each other, you know, move up the line. You know, I think that what you're doing, I wish, and I really wish sincerely, that that we as a group could be instrumental in opening up a school. And just, because basically, if I talk to a kid about painting an arm or a tree or a bush, I'm also teaching them something about life. You know, I used to take the little ones and put beans in a cup, and we're going to watch them. You know, and we're going to put it in a plastic cup so you can see the roots coming up. But don't pull it out to see if it's growing, because you'll kill it. Just wait. That's why you put it in a plastic cup. There's so much to give. There's so much to share. And it's important to remember that. You know.
So I just have a couple questions. Do you have anything more?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So how have the arts changed over the time you've lived in Orlando?
My first impression was the caliber has changed. It hasn't changed. The caliber is changing because some of the people that we're meeting are people with higher goals. But it's like pick and choose. You found a whole different set of rules, a whole different set of people. And what we have is, and I don't think that we're a special group, I think that we communicate with each other. And some of it is, a lot of what we see is very rewarding. Very rewarding because you have people sitting. It's not about making a judgment on a person's work when you realize they work very hard. We don't all see the same thing, you know. And so, but they're serious painters. They're serious. They study. They work. They share, and that's important. We had a bunch of people here about 2 weeks ago. We sat. We talked about our work. We showed each other what we're doing, but it's serious art. And I didn't know Hispanic artists with this caliber of education. You know, they have master's degrees. They've reached the epitome of history and education, and that to me is interesting. When we started changing, we started reaching out to these people, and then I was the first one to say, okay, we need a total biography. Where did you study? Who did you study with? And then we saw that their studies and their teachers reflect on the work, and the teachers were all famous. They're all famous. And he said they were tough. They were tough teachers. But they had to be, because in the arts, you have lots of wannabes. And with the social media, you know, and we see so many people who just publish, and one of the men who left, thank God, and he was always sending somebody saying, oh, go to talk to Angel and the group because they'll have a place for you. He said, no, you have no background. You can't sit and have a conversation. It's not to have an enlightened conversation with somebody, it's to be able to talk on human grounds. And teaching is very important. Most of the people in the group have been teachers. And that to me is very important. Okay? So we've changed more than, because this was like, in a sense, it was like a wasteland. When we first got here, the only thing we had was Osceola Arts. And they're more interested now in the performing arts, in music and theater. And so their drawing has changed. You know, it's just now only 1 week. And we used to be filled up. We had people knocking on the doors saying, please take my child. $140 for a week, 5 days from 8 until 4 with lunch. And boy, those kids loved it. They got to share, they had communication. And boys and girls, we had different groups, ages and all that. And to me, the most important thing of all this is that if you can teach somebody to use this in their hands, you're giving them a tool that they can use anywhere. It's like doctors and musicians. Musicians make good doctors. I thought, isn't that interesting? You know, but that the idea that you have more than, you know, you're using left and right brain at the same time. And if you know more than one language, it's also very important. So they're barriers that are man-made, but they're very normal things, you know. And I look at you both. Daniel, you have a very, very pleasant sense that I can feel. You know, it's nice, Alexandra. You know, just because it's not about a battle of wits or a battle of knowledge. It's an exchange. It's a communication. And that's a very important thing to have. You know, you have a pleasant personality.
Thank you.
You know, and that's important. That pleasant personality, because it puts it all on a different level. You know, I've struggled more than anything else with my own, because I expect a lot from myself, and I tend to be my worst enemy. And when I think about what I'm inspired, what I'm looking for, and if you hold for 1 second, I'll show you what I look for in my work.
All right, I'll pause.
Come on, I'll tell you something.
Okay. Question, because we collect a lot
Okay.
related to Pulse. Did you make any Pulse art?
Yeah, the piece that in the.
Yeah. Why did you feel compelled to do it?
I think because coming from a lifestyle that encompasses all peoples, lots of my friends, I've been to a gay club. I mean, and it doesn't, I don't find any distinctions. And to me, when I saw this, when it happened, I was at my daughter's, and she said, "Dad, they're going to I got to go by there," and we saw the lines, and she said, "I've been looking for a place to give blood, but can't give blood there because look at the lines and the water. I mean, there was nothing." And I guess you mentioned something that you had to go someplace else.
Yep, we tried to go to a bunch of that day. We tried to go.
And to me, it just and so when Marilyn said, "Oh, I'm doing a Pulse show, a Pulse exhibit," it hurt. It hurt because I have friends who have died from AIDS. I have friends who have committed suicide, and it's. I think that to feel the pain, to feel the hurt that people feel sometimes, is to understand this is another human being with another pain. And because there was never any distinction between myself and my friends, you know, men and women, it didn't matter. They were friends. They were good, honest people. One of my best friends was my best man at my wedding, you know, and it was just, he was a nice human being, kind, you know, and it was, I kept thinking at the time, who is, you know, a man I respect and feel very close to, And it was a neighbor when I had my studio. I had my little penthouse and he had a bigger penthouse. And we'd sit and talk about art and music and theater, and he was a journalist. And he had, I always liked people with brains, people who could talk and explain things. And so it was very painful to look at the exhibit that you have, because there were so many aspects of it. And Marilyn, when she was doing the show here, she said, "Would you put a piece together?" And I said, "Sure." It's back to the compassion thing.
Yeah.
We have to understand, that it takes all that.
So I've got one final question that I like
What's
to
that?
ask
Okay.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So like I mentioned when we started and all our meetings and everything, this interview will be sitting in our archive forever.
Mm-hmm.
So for a potential listener to this interview in, say, 40 or 50 years, what's a message you'd like them to hear? What's a thing that you want them to know? Could be important to you, could be about the community, whatever you just want them to know.
I think the most important thing is that we return to the values that the people that made this country what it is brought. That to me is what made me who I am. It's the values of all those different people. Because to me it was the greatest gift of all. Made me understand myself, understand them, and the culture they brought, what I learned from their values. And everybody had it. Everyone had it. And when you sit, like you're sitting outside a building on a chair, and there's all these different peoples sitting there having conversations and watching the kids running by or playing right in front of the building. That was a customary thing. You do that in small villages. But they had values. You were expected to respect their values as well. We were never, by neighbors, we were never called by our first names. We were called Don Tomas's children. That's the way, Mrs. McGovern's son. That was a connection. That was the respect. That was the value. And Lord, if you sassed anybody, even a kid your age, and an adult heard it, when you got home, your parents knew about it. It was rich. It was very rich.
So, do you have any questions or anything? Do you have anything else that you'd like to share or anything?
No, I think, as I said, I wish that one day, more people pay attention to the needs of children in this world, no matter where you are, no matter where you come from, no matter where they are. That is the best thing that we can do for anybody. And I'm going to thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it has been. All right. Okay.